Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, and welcome to the Season 6 finale of Pangolin, the conservation podcast. I know it's come around too soon. This is the show dedicated to exploring and amplifying the world's underappreciated conservation stories. The stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. I'm your host, Jack Baker, and as always, to celebrate the end of an era, we are going big. And so I am rejoined by one of my favorite guests of all time. One of the first people I ever spoke to on the show almost 4 years ago, the wonderful Kelsey Prediger. So, for those of you who haven't been around since then, Kelsey was one of the first kind of guests when we were back and it was called Plight of the Pangolin and it was just focused on the pangolin. Back then she was a master's student working in Namibia and we had a chat about her work and the threats to the species, and it was really, really interesting. And I think it was one of those conversations that really inspired me to keep doing what I was doing, and it was brilliant. And since then, Kelsey's gone on to be even more inspirational than she was back then. She has founded her own organisation, the Pangolin Conservation and Research Foundation. She's worked to influence policy to protect the pangolin across Namibia, and is working across many African countries now to help protect them. And generally, she's remained one of the coolest, nicest, and wonderful people that I've ever met in the conservation space. She's just, been really wonderful and supportive of the show for 4 years now, and it was so nice to get to sit down and catch up with her again. We talk about her work, all she wants to do in the future, and what has changed for the pangolin in the last 4 years. That doesn't mean it's all good. We continue to highlight the fact that we need your support. We need you to spread the message. We need you to love and continue to love and raise awareness of the pangolin. And because we didn't do this all the way back then, I make her pick an animal that isn't the pangolin to highlight as her favourite underappreciated species, and I love it. It has burrowed its way into my heart to give you a little taster of what it might be, and it's brilliant and wonderful, and yeah, I can't wait for you to hear all about it, because it's another fantastic one. So I will let the episode play. I will also say thank you so much for supporting the show this season. Make sure to subscribe, because even though this is the end of season 6, there will be a season 7 coming very, 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 very soon in June, which will all be themed around one thing, which I haven't announced yet, but I'm very excited for because I've got amazing guests lined up. 8 episodes, 1 month. Let's see what happens. So subscribe so you don't miss out on that. And yeah, thank you. I love you all. I can't believe the last 4 years have been the last 4 years. I can't believe it's been 4 years since I talked to Kelsey. Oh, I'm getting emotional. So before we get too into all that, thank you. I love you all. Subscribe, do all these things. Enjoy the podcast. And yes, let's get started. And welcome back to the show. Today I am joined by Kelsey Prediger, founder of the Pangolin Conservation and Research Foundation, and for long-term listeners of the show, one of the first guests I think we ever had, maybe episode 2 or 3, and she is back now with far more pangolin stories that she has gathered over the last unbelievably 4 years, and I'm so excited to talk to her. So thank you so much for joining us once again, all this time after the first time, Kelsey. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. It's so excited to talk again and, revisit pangolin things, because a lot has happened in the last 4 years for both of us.
Yes, I was thinking about this, and I think it's prompted me to have this weird moment of when we first did this, I was doing this as a master's project at university, and now we're almost 100 episodes in. We've done episodes on all sorts of things, but the pangolin has remained our banner species, this perfect creature that the perfect representation of all these things that people don't know enough about, but should, because they're amazing and wonderful. And so it's so good every so often, I think, to revisit that and go, we use its name often, so I have to give it credit and come back to these things. And I'm so excited to see, yeah, what has changed with you, what's the same, what's different, what, yeah, exciting things have happened in the last few years. I guess to get us started, the first thing that I always ask, even though you've been here before, maybe it's more of a reintroduction to some people, but could you introduce yourself to the listeners and just give them a little bit of information about who you are, what you do? Yeah, just a little, yeah, introduction.
Yeah, so my name is Kelsey Prediger, and I am living and working in Namibia. When we last spoke 4 years ago, I was wrapping up my master's thesis in pangolin ecology. And due to the COVID-19 pandemic, I lost my job and started my own nonprofit. And so now I am the founder and executive director of the Pangolin Conservation Research Foundation, which has grown over the past 4 years. And I am also co chair of Southern Africa for the IUCN Pangolin Specialist Group.
Mhm. That's fantastic, and I think it's like it's really, yeah, it's we really got you at like the start of your journey. Then for this first interview, I like we got you right at the beginning, and now like as that was all happening, and yeah, because for listeners who don't know, we kind of started this conversation. The first series was all recorded during the pandemic, and so yeah, it's kind of like interesting to see the start of your journey and where you've ended up now with this entire organization. Like, I wondered, could you tell us like a little bit about that organization? Because I guess like it's a lot of that, I guess, is in the title. But what could you tell us a little bit about? Yeah, the foundation, what it does, and yeah, I know you kind of talked a little bit about um why you started it with like you kind of finishing up, but like what inspired you to kind of take the lead on it yourself? I guess instead of going and finding another organization and working with them, what it's really interesting to yeah think about you starting this as a thing. So yeah, could you tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about it and where it came from?
Definitely. Yeah, no, it's a great question you have, because it's actually pretty crazy to say this out loud, but even today there are very few organizations dedicated to the conservation of pangolins in Africa. And as I was doing my master's, and slowly kind of becoming an expert in pangolin conservation with a focus on wild pangolins, there was only other one other project that was studying wild pangolins. And so for me, it seemed quite natural that we desperately need an organization that can address the gaps in pangolin conservation. There's still quite a few people around the world that don't know what they are, and very few organizations dedicated to their understanding, protection, and survival. And so the whole aim of the organization was to address gaps in pangolin conservation efforts across southern Africa, where we can use the organization to benefit the species. And so, although we were founded and based in Namibia, I've expanded and we do work across borders in southern Africa for the Temminck's pangolin. So, to make the long story short of what we do, we of course have a heavy focus on applied research to understand the species in order to inform conservation management planning, SOPs, as well as policy. And then we also do a lot of capacity building and collaboration from the expertise we have in order to better conserve and protect pangolins across their range with other organizations on the ground in some of these areas where little efforts have been done. Additionally, a very big focus for us is community engagement. As a small grassroots organization, we have these five main pillars. There's two I still haven't mentioned. And basically, everything we do overlaps in order to maximize the funding we get and maximize our efforts. So, we have a community project called the Nai Nai Pangolin Project, where we employ local indigenous San Bushmen in their communities to protect pangolins. And at the same time, we're also doing research on these wild pangolins to better understand their ecology to make better decisions about their protection. So that's a really important project that combines a lot of elements, because the other two aspects of what we do, one is education and awareness. offering locals opportunities for student internships, as well as going to schools and creating materials and doing interviews like this to raise awareness for the species locally and internationally. And then finally, in response to a need in the country, we also assist with the rehabilitation and release of trafficked pangolins. So it's kind of a mouthful, but we have our applied research that we focus on, the community engagement and outreach side of things, collaboration and capacity building. Then we do rehabilitation and release, and then education and awareness. So we've got those five main branches that we divide our efforts into, but most of them overlap in every aspect of the work we do.
Mhm. Yeah, I was going to say that that's really interesting because I think there's a lot of organizations that I talk to and I kind of have spoken to over the last few years where it's like this thing of like they divide these things up and they do it in different ways. And I think that kind of way of, but your way of dividing it there in that those five pillars, I can see exactly how they kind of, yeah, like, and how not only do they overlap, but they support one another, they back each other up, and how being good at kind of these maybe kind of education outreach kind of things also benefits the kind of community side or benefits the kind of maybe policies because you're kind of shaping all of this together. I think it's a really nice rounded approach. It probably results in you having to be an expert in so many different things and probably has many challenges for you personally because you'll have to become an expert in so many different things, but it must be so fantastic and rewarding to try and do all of this in the way that you are, and because it all seems to link together so nicely. I think that's really, really interesting. Mhm.
Yeah, it's really interesting and exciting in many ways because you know when you approach conservation, it needs to be a very holistic approach. And oftentimes, the behind the scenes work is having a bigger impact than the on the ground, field work kind of research work. And so, what's nice is we're able to combine everything. And it has definitely made me a jack of all trades. But what's great about that is one gets a better understanding of every aspect and why it's important for conservation. So it's definitely been a really interesting and exciting process because so many of these different things build on one another. And in every aspect of what we do, we collect information in order to make better decisions and improve the work we're doing. So there's, that applied research in everything that we do, which has been really exciting to see how this work does make a difference for pangolins.
hmm And I guess what's really interesting is all of that is so kind of, yeah, as you said, the kind of applied work and the kind of things that you're doing, kind of not only to better understand this kind of animals and gain this better understanding, but you also are then able to kind of, you're then acting to kind of with communities and with people and with these different groups to try and actively make change. I guess like the question that makes me think of and kind of makes me reflect on a little bit is like a few years ago when we had our first conversation, we talked a lot about trafficking and we talked about kind of engaging communities then, and we talked about some of these different challenges that the pangolin faces and trying to and that you faced in your work. And I wondered over the past few years, and I kind of now working and running this organization and working with all of these groups, you probably have a very different understanding, I would guess, of these threats and the different things that are going on, the conservation challenges. Yeah, do you think that pangolin conservation has changed over the past few years? Has your understanding of has your understanding of pangolin conservation changed over the last few years about these threats and sort of things that are going on? Like, yeah, I sorry, that's quite a big question, but any thoughts?
Yeah, it is definitely a big question. And I would say, definitely in many aspects, conservation has changed. My view on things has changed. Where I direct my resources has changed. Um, and definitely all of the things that have happened has shaped me into realizing how important it is to overlap the different pillars of the organization, as I mentioned, because awareness is key, prevention is key. And a lot of the work that has been done up until now has been very reactive in terms of, rehabilitation and release. And I've also been able to realize the importance of this applied research that we do, because every day we're learning new things, but we're actually able to develop guidelines and standard practices for the species from the data we gather. So it just shows that, everything is so valuable and important. And since we last had our meeting, I was able to use my master's thesis to help the government here write the conservation management plan. And of course, we have a lot of, blank spaces or places where we need a lot more information, but it was nice to be able to have some basis to go off of. And so I would definitely say that over the years, I've expanded the work that I do, but I still remain very dedicated to that baseline data collection in order to inform conservation planning decisions. And for those people that aren't listening now, I'd like to just explain what my master's was focused on, because we did learn quite a bit from that. My master's degree was focused on the home range size, prey preference, and burrow selectivity of the ground pangolin in one study site. And what's been really exciting is to take that research and expand it across not even Namibia, but also Southern Africa, and use the principles from my master's thesis to help us understand pangolins in their habitat across their range. And what's been very interesting is that we have found there are regional differences in prey preference. And everything that I've studied up until now was with the intention of making better decisions on how to improve survival for live confiscated pangolins. And so since that last call, it's been really amazing because we've been able to GPS tag 25 trafficked pangolins for post-release monitoring to understand their survival and what makes release successful or not. We've also been able to determine that there's about 3 different regional preferences for pangolins, and depending on the prey they eat in rehab will depend on what kind of habitat you should try and release them in. So it's definitely been one of those things where it feels like everything has come full circle. The data I collected maybe 5-6 years ago is actually helping shape decisions now. At the time, we witnessed quite a few pangolins die in the drought due to starvation. Well, now I get animals that are starving for other reasons because they've been in the illegal wildlife trade. So it's been really amazing to have all of that come around full circle, um, and carry that forward.
Hmm. Yeah, that must be so satisfying to know, like, oh, I did this work and it's not like, because I think a lot of the time when we're doing kind of our undergrads or our masters or whatever, a lot of people, I think, yeah, they're like, okay, we've just got to get to the deadline, we've just got to get this thing submitted, we've just got to get it done, we've just got to get this, we've just got to get that, and then we'll pass, and then we'll go off and we'll do our things. And it's so nice to hear that, like, you were so genuinely passionate about what you were doing, and not only genuinely passionate about what you were genuinely passionate in doing something that is still useful and interesting. And I think that's the thing that, like, I don't know, I always aspire to. Like, when I was applying to do my PhD and stuff, like, I've always wanted to do stuff that I'm like, I don't want this to sit on a shelf forever. And it's so nice that you've been able to take that work and not let it just sit on a shelf, but actually apply it and do these things and let the work kind of grow and expand and be useful. That's so inspirational and so fantastic. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And, like, yeah, I have so many questions now that I want to ask about it and how it's all grown, and these things. But I guess, like, yeah, that's there was a couple of things you mentioned there. Obviously, like, you kind of talked about how you were looking at the kind of starving and these kind of thing in the past. When we were talking, I think at the time we did kind of touch on this kind of the drought and climate change as an issue. And so I wondered, like, would you say, I think at the time we said the 3 major threats to pangolins were, it was kind of this climate in wet issues. We talked a lot about habitat fragmentation and kind of things like that. We talked about trafficking. D- do you think those still remain as those? Do you think those are still the biggest kind of threats, or has your opinion changed on that and kind of you're more like, oh, we need to focus the what would you say the main kind of focus is now of the kind of threats that we discussed then?
Yeah, so I do think that, those themes are still at the top of the list, but I would say as time has passed in Namibia, particularly, we've seen a lot more electrical fencing, which is a major concern for pangolins. In Namibia, I would say trafficking is still the highest threat to pangolins, but then the erection of electrical fencing is also killing pangolins, unfortunately, at a very high rate. I know in South Africa, they estimate that more pangolins die on electrical fences than they do from trafficking. So I would say that is a very, very big threat to the species. And so we are doing some awareness and work on that this year as well. But I would say the top three threats remain trafficking, electrical fencing, and this like climate change and drought. Um, Last year was not the best of rains, and the rains didn't still have hardly come. And we've, found some dead pangolins around the country that weren't even tagged. And it brings that concern that if the rains don't come, and mind you, we have 1 month left, um, and there's some areas that haven't even gotten rain this rainy season. So that means, there's going to be potentially a pretty huge die off because the species does not um, migrate or move to follow the rains. If the food isn't there, then they die. And, this is, climate change and drought. It's also highly related to the trafficking. In trafficking years, the numbers spike in drought conditions because the pangolins are more active in the day and they're more visible with less grass. And so, definitely, all of those things are related. I would say those are the top three things, but habitat fragmentation still does remain a major threat where fences are going up and, communities are expanding. And what happens very often is as pangolins are dispersing, they walk into a community. And maybe that community would poach them, or maybe they don't mean any harm, but that if the community collects them, they're often usually still translocated. And that's not a good thing because their territorial and their survival after release, whether they were trafficked or translocated, is not 100%. Because they're territorial, it makes relocation quite complicated.
Hmm. Hmm. That's really, there's so many things there that are really interesting. I hadn't even thought about before in terms of, especially when you were even like when you talked about the kind of the it, I think a lot of us think of drought and think of animals not struggling because there is not the resources perhaps maybe there usually is. But I don't, to think about that as a related issue with trafficking is something that I think like I hadn't really, well, I thought about but not really considered at all beyond maybe a passing kind of thought. So it's really interesting to think about these things as not just threats on their own but interconnected and kind of overlapping. And I guess the trouble is with the pangolin is a lot of these threats are these kind of large, kind of meta, big challenges that are kind of quite hard to start to address and unpick and try and work around and understand and get people to engage it. Like they're quite big challenges. And I wondered then to kind of turn the conversation around a little bit into the more hopeful and kind of things that we're kind of that are maybe changing for the positive in the work that we're doing, the work that you're doing to kind of change these things and try and stop them and improve. Like I know we talked a little bit about the kind of plan that your master's work contributed to, but what other kind of projects, kind of practical projects, are there some that you'd like to mention that the Pangolin kind of Conservation and Research Foundation are working on to kind of address these things?
Yeah. So there's a quite a few different things I would say that give hope for the future. I mentioned that we do a lot of collaboration and capacity building, which has been exciting to be involved in countries that have not yet done anything. So last year I was in Tanzania with an amazing organization that's up and coming for pangolin conservation, called the Tanzania Research Conservation Organization. And I've also helped some projects in Botswana and Zambia. And this year we're going to be putting an extra special focus on Angola. And I would say that's, really exciting and hopeful for these places where, basically nothing has happened, which is very exciting. And in terms of like the bigger picture of, combating these bigger threats, it's been really exciting to see this World Pangolin Day, how many organizations actually shared about pangolins and their plight and talked about pangolins and their plight. And this is an area that I think people underestimate the importance is awareness. We are excited to have been reaching more and more people every year. And I get people reaching out on social media about these collaborations. And so it's been really exciting to use that platform of awareness to actually connect and help people in pangolin conservation. So I'd say that's a really big area. And again, you can see these themes are overlapping. Through awareness, we're building partnerships and collaborations to build capacity for pangolin conservation. So that's been very, very exciting. And this year, the conservation management plan that I contributed to should be actually released and enforced within this country, which will change a lot of the way that things are done and serve as an example for countries who haven't written any plans or anything yet. As far as I know, in Southern Africa, I think Malawi is the only country that has an enacted plan. I could be speaking incorrectly, but as far as I know, they're the only ones that have an official plan that is implemented. And I can speak from my role under the IUCN PSG that we are actually planning a regional workshop to develop a regional strategy that would serve as a baseline framework for each range state to develop their own conservation management plan. And this is very important because at the moment there's very little funding or very little interest in pangolin conservation. Despite the fact that they're the most trafficked mammal in the world, efforts and funds are still very much lacking. And so, what's exciting about this workshop is that it brings the focus on the species and demands action. And so, I'm very excited for that to happen in September of this year. It'll be held in Johannesburg, and we should have stakeholders from all of Southern Africa attending that. So there's definitely a lot of exciting things happening on a larger scale that will have a very positive, big impact for pangolins.
Hmm. Hmm. It feels nice to know that these things are happening, because I guess like when we had that conversation 4 years ago or so, it kind of felt like, not that nobody cared, because obviously people cared and there was work going on and there was things, but it felt like there was kind of this like, not that you were on your own, but it felt like there was a lot less collaboration, and there was a lot less of these networks, and there was a lot less of this kind of like unified kind of work that was going on, and a lot less care and a lot less. And so to see now that you're at the stage where you can have these meetings and have these things where people are brought together and kind of discuss this, it's so encouraging, so encouraging. It must feel good to kind of look back, I guess. Like, do you notice that kind of change of like, oh, it feels like in the last 4 years we've really done something and there's this momentum build?
Yeah, definitely. It's been really exciting because when we, I think, had our first call, we were just starting the Namibian Pangolin Working Group, which I served as the secretariat and coordinator of for almost 3 years. Um, and so, that was kind of like the beginning of a lot of momentum here in Namibia, and has been able to help also get some things off the ground in Botswana. And then with the restructuring of the IUCN PSG, it's really made a big difference to get to become a part of that, especially as a co chair in bringing people together across the regions. So definitely we've come a really long way, and it's really exciting to finally be up higher at the top of things where we are making really big impacts and changes for the species.
Yeah, it's just amazing to see how far it has all come, and it's like it's really kind of gratifying and satisfying to know like these things are all happening and work is going on, and hopefully there's this change and this kind of, and I'll be interested to see in another 4 years. We'll have to have you back on again to talk about it and see kind of what the how it's all changed again, because I think it's just it's so fantastic and interesting to see how this has grown and changed, and so reassuring, I guess, that like I think sometimes obviously it's hard to want to keep going, and so hard when you have all this kind of like not bad news, but when you have all this kind of like all this stuff going on, that like it's sometimes hard to kind of keep inspired, and to look back now and see that so much has changed is really re-inspiring and really kind of nice to see that these things are happening, and it's exciting to think about what the future may hold. It's fantastic. I guess like we're reaching the end of our kind of our time together, but I think that something that kind of has popped up in my mind is that we have talked a lot about threats, and we've talked a lot about what you've done, and we've talked a lot about pangolin conservation in general. But I think like over the last 4 years, we've we've kind of neglected the main character, which is of course the pangolin itself. And I wondered like in the past 4 years, what the kind of most you must have had some amazing experiences, learned some amazing things, thought about some amazing things. What is the thing that you think about of the last 4 years where you're like, I can't believe this is a thing. I'm amazed that this is a thing. I have learned this. Like, what is the thing? Yeah, that if you look back on what has been the most amazing thing to have learned or done in the last 3 or 4 years.
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yep.
There's a lot that has happened in the last 4 years. Do you mean like directly from pangolins, or in like some of our accomplishments and like achievements?
You could we could go one of each, whatever you feel is the most fitting, like whatever you prefer.
Okay. Well, I can say that like in the last 4 years, one really exciting thing has been that we actually last September opened a research center for pangolin conservation, which is the first in the world for pangolin conservation, which is very exciting and not something I necessarily thought we would ever do. And then in terms of some really amazing experiences with pangolins, is that I would like to use a current example. Um, we actually have a baby pangolin that we have in rehabilitation, and I would say it's been so amazing to watch his natural instinct for foraging. So he's only about a month and a half old, about 2 months, and he's already ready to start eating ants and termites in between his bottle feeding. And that has been absolutely remarkable to see. And it gives me hope that we're going to have a lot of success getting him back into the wild once he's big enough.
hmm That's fantastic, and that's a beautiful, hopeful kind of I love that. That's fantastic, and I think it's amazing how these when we think about big scary issues that we need to deal with and big conservation challenges, sometimes these little things remind us why it's all worth it and why it's good to keep going. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And so, must bring a smile to your face every day where you're like, this is what we do it all for.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's been a very rewarding process to get to be a part of rehabilitation, in the fact that we know we're improving the survival rates of released animals.
hmm Yeah, it must just be the most satisfying thing, the most satisfying and gratifying thing. That's fantastic, like absolutely fantastic. Um, I guess thinking about all of this, we've talked about what you do, which is a lot every day, and and all of these things that you and your organization is working on. But I guess the listeners at home probably they've loved pangolins since day one of the podcast, and they would probably love to know how they can do more. So, what would you say if someone's listening and feeling inspired? how can they contribute and what can they do to kind of either help you or help the pangolin more generally? What can they do?
Well, there's a lot of things people at home can do. First and foremost, I would say go and follow us on social media. It's Pangolin CRF. We're on Instagram and Facebook and working on getting some YouTube and TikToks up. Because by following us and sharing, you're spreading awareness for the species. There's still so many people that don't know pangolins exist. So just simply by following and sharing, some of the cool videos or fun facts really helps get the word out there for pangolins. Because the more we can raise awareness for them, the more we can, unlock a, a strong future for them. Through the awareness, it raises more funding, more donors are interested to get involved in that kind of thing. You can also plan a talk in your community, whether it be at school or if you want to plan a fun event. We've had a few of our followers do something fun like painting with pangolins or pints for pangolins, where they raise some money for our organization and help our efforts on the ground. Um, there's quite a few things that you can do. Just make sure you're following all the major pangolin NGOs and sharing that information. And if you have any ideas of how you want to help more, feel free to reach out to us on our email or social media. um, we're always looking for interested people that might want to be involved in either awareness or fundraising, or even doing your studies. We've got lots of opportunities for people to make a contribution.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. And I think like yeah, so many options, so many things to do, and I'll put links to everything you mentioned in the description of the episode if anyone is interested and wants to go and be more involved and do these things and reach out and yeah, so everything will be down there. Perfect. And I guess then the last kind of question I've been asking everyone recently is well, since we last spoke, I think the podcast has grown arms and legs and thought about kind of grown to be more than just about this one kind of amazing animal. We've talked about all sorts of things that fall under this pangolin banner of underappreciated things that people should know more about, whether they be snails or creepy crawlies or kind of birds or fish or all sorts of bizarre, interesting animals and plants and things have come up. And so now I think we're going back to the beginning with you. And at that time, we focused entirely on pangolins, but I want to know now a little bit about maybe something else you're passionate about or interested in. And so the question I've been asking everybody recently is what is your favorite underappreciated animal apart from the pangolin, of course? What is the other underappreciated species, plant or animal, that you just love and want to shine a spotlight on?
Well, if I can only choose one, because generally I like to talk about all the species that pangolins share burrows with, I would talk about the aardvark, because the aardvark are actually the ones in southern Africa that dig the burrows for not only pangolins, but a lot of other species. And their skills to dig these burrows are amazing. Some of these complexes could be more than 10, 20 meters long with more than 10 chambers, providing literally like an entire, animal village underground. And it's so important because a lot of these species, like the pangolin and the aardvark, can't survive the daily temperatures in this area. In the summer months, we regularly reach over 45 degrees Celsius. And so the aardvarks essentially are providing, a thermal refuge for many other species, which I think is really amazing. And just in general, they're a really cool and interesting animal to learn more about.
I think and you'll be not surprised to know that that is the second time, I think, second time the Aardvark has come up, and I think I need to do a full Aardvark dedicated episode now. So if you know anyone who loves Aardvarks and can talk for an hour about them, I would be very interested in having them on the show because I think yes, they are a brilliant, bizarre, charismatic, important thing that like. Yeah, we kind of see and think maybe it looks a bit funny or it's a bit interesting or it's a bit that, but yeah, we should talk more about. So that's a fantastic, fantastic choice. Fantastic choice. Um,
Yeah, thanks.
yeah, brilliant, 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 brilliant. I guess It also makes me think of my masters because I remember we did that we did a camera trapping exercise remotely where we had to we had to ask people to put camera traps out for us, and we had to find an aardvark, and I never found one in the end. And so I had this like vendetta against them, where like I need to find an aardvark at some point in my life, and I've managed to see one since, and I've watched lots of documentaries, but like I need to speak to an expert about them to get the full lowdown and rundown on them for a full episode, I think. Um, and yes, I guess then, with that all being said, unfortunately, that brings us right towards the end of our time. So just thank you so much for being here. Do you want to plug the social media handles and stuff one more time so people remember where to go? Where should they go again?
Yeah, definitely. If everyone that's listening could please give us a follow. Pangolin Conservation and Research Foundation is the name of our organization, and our social media handle is Pangolin CRF on Instagram and Facebook. We share lots of fun and interesting videos about our work and experiences in the field. So we hope you can follow us and you can learn more about how you can contribute through donations or fundraisers to our organization on our website, which is pangolincrf.org. And just in general, feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions or thoughts about something fun you could do for awareness or fundraising for pangolins.
Perfect. Perfect. And I will put, as I say, links to all of that in the description of this episode, alongside the links to all of our social media. We're at Pangolin Podcast on everything, and you can follow us there as well and subscribe to the podcast and do all these things that are wonderful and lovely. Leave us a nice review, all that sort of stuff. Because I think I'll have to do. I'm now like I need to do more pangolin episodes more regularly. There'll be a lot more pangolin content coming, I think, very very soon, because I love whenever I talk about them, it puts a smile back on my face. And yes, I'm so yes. Make sure and follow all of Kelsey's work and all of the kind of accounts that she's plugged there. So yeah, thank you for mentioning them all. And yes, they'll be in the description of the episode. I guess then that unfortunately brings us towards the end of our time. So all that remains is for me to say a huge thank you to you, Kelsey, for your time and your insights and for all of your work and for being a guest all those years ago and coming back now. Thank you so much for all of your time. It's been absolutely fantastic to have a chat with you again and a catch up and hear all about the amazing things that you've done since our first conversation. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for all you do to spread awareness for conservation around the world. It's amazing to see how the podcast has grown and some of the amazing conservationists that have been featured on it.
Thank you so much. That no, it means the world, because it's like it's fantastic to think that like something I've done under the Pangolin's name with your help has done something like it's been able to talk to amazing people and done all these things. And it's kind of strange to think now. I'm really reflecting on the 4 years thing. It feels kind of scary, but like, thank you. It's been fantastic. And yes, before we turn this into just us complimenting each other, we should wrap up. But thank you so much for your time again. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in and supporting us. And I guess until next time, goodbye, everybody.